Hello there. So it's been 3 months since I last did a video on the UAZ, and I thought I'd better update you because a lot has changed. Not so much with the UAZ, but in my life. So, moved house, of course. With the house, I've got this amazing place, this barn. So the workshop has all changed. Everything is now down here with me. Actually, no, I haven't got everything. I haven't got my lathe, my mill, one more bit of racking, and my 2-post ramp. It's been a bit of a nightmare. You'll see it soon. I'll sort it out, don't worry. Once we decided we were going to move, the progress on the UAZ stopped because basically we had like 3 months to be ready to move. I knew it wasn't going to be done in that time. So rather than progress the wiring on that, I just made sure the comma was in a decent enough condition to do multiple trips up and down the motorway, carting stuff around. And it's been brilliant. I reckon it's done probably 1,000 miles back and forth, loaded up to the roof, no issues. Brilliant van.
Light them up!
Let's make the trip back to Wales. This is inside. So what else has changed? Me and Rowena have moved house. We no longer live in England. We moved to Wales, which is where I'm from originally. So that's nice to be back here. The job I've done for the last 12 years, which I'm pretty sure I've never mentioned on the channel, in the Navy working on helicopters, if you're wondering. I've just left that. I no longer do that. So I'm on the lookout for work, and I would love to do the YouTube stuff full time, but full disclosure, right? $20 a month I make from YouTube. So it's not going to happen yet. Maybe once I crack the $30 a month bracket, maybe. So I've not been too interested really in making a video of me doing the wiring on this, right? Because it's a slow, laborious project. I am not very... I can do it, but Christ, it takes some brain power, and I've got to literally write things down, work things out, and to do a video on top of that would be more work again, and also it wouldn't be very interesting. So I've got to a point now where I'm literally about to start wrapping the loom up with loom tape, and I was thinking, do I just want to show you guys a wrapped up loom and go, hey, I did it, isn't it amazing? Let me show you what's under that tape. That's not me saying that under the tape is terrible. It's fine. I'm very happy with it all, but I just want to show you the chaos before it gets wrapped up and it looks half tidy. So excuse the mess. If you've never had a wiring loom apart before, well, this is going to look crazy and pretty overwhelming. Now, if you're adding additional wires and sending wires off here, there and everywhere, yeah, before it gets wrapped up, it looks like utter carnage, and you've got to make notes and you've got to label things, otherwise it's going to be hard work. But this is where we're at the minute. We've got the ECU mounted here. We've got a block of 4 relays and 12 fuses at the back. Here we have USB sockets, 12-volt socket. The top plug is to connect the laptop to the ECU for tuning. Underneath, I'm not sure if you can see it, there's an OBD plug under there, so for fault reading. If you didn't want to use the laptop, you could just plug in the OBD reader there. Then we have the main wiring loom, which runs down here under the dash. Then under the dash we have 2 buzz bars, which I think you should be able to see. The one on the right is permanently fed by the battery, and then the one on the left is only fed when the ignition is on. So if you don't know what a buzz bar is, let me just show you one back here. This is going to be the battery. Basically, the positive lead of the battery is going to feed into this. Then everything connected to these then is then fed by whatever you fed into it. So if this was ignition going into this, when the ignition's fed, these are all live. but because this is battery positive, when it's connected to the battery, these are all fed by the battery. Then what we have here is, these are basically all the inputs to like switches and gauges. So they're all labelled up, like that one is to the hazard switch, that one is for dash gauge lights, that's from the flasher, so that goes into the back of the hazard switch. That's the switch to ignition, so that's going to go into the back of the ignition switch. And then under here I have another fuse and relay box with the provision of 6 relays and 6 fuses, I believe. So whereas originally this vehicle would have had no relays and just 2 fuses, it's now got 18 fuses and 10 relays. If you didn't know what a relay was, I'd imagine you do, but I thought I'd quickly talk you through one now and why I've added so many in. This is a 5-pin relay. There the 5 terminals are, even 5-terminal relay, and you can see they're all numbered. And then them numbers correspond to the little circuit diagram on the back. A 4-pin 4-terminal relay is the same as a 5-terminal relay, just with the 5th center terminal missing. So let me talk you through what we've got. We've got 30, which is your main power coming in. Let's say that's your big battery feed coming in. And then you've got 87, which is your service coming out. So let's say the horn. Let's say the horn is on the other side of that. And then we've got 85 and 86, which are connected to an electromagnet. So 85, we could have power coming in from the horn switch. And then 86 would just go to earth. So when I press my horn switch, this electromagnet is energized and it pulls down this switch and it connects terminal 30 to terminal 87, and then you've got power going to your horn. So the horn is just a little example, but let's say it was something like high capacity, like some sort of big chunky motor, and every time you press the button to turn that motor on, all the power is going through the little contacts of that switch, and over time it wear it down. And sometimes you can, no doubt people who mess around with cars in their younger days without adding relays and stuff where they should have, would have found that, you know, switches would stick on or they'd burn out because you're basically asking too much of them. Well, if you go to a relay, that switch does bugger all. It just energizes that. I don't even know what the power consumption of that is. Next to nothing. But if you look, the relay can take 80 amps, which is lots. So by adding relays into circuits, you are then taking the load away from your little switch and you're putting it through this, which is not only rated to it, but it can also be replaced if it ever plays up. Now, to tell you what the 5th pin does, if you look, so this is your switch, isn't it? This is 30 coming in, 87 is your supply coming out once the magnet is energized. But when it's off, 87A is fed. So that this is in its off position, power is fed through to 87A. So you can have something that when you momentarily press the button, it turns it off. Or it switches between 2 circuits, 87A and 87. Your call, your wiring, you do what you want. Just to add something in, which I didn't mention there, is that with this 85 and 86, you do not need to have a switch 12 volts coming in. If it suits you, you can have a switched earth. So you could have a permanent 12 volts coming into the 85 or 86, and then you can just switch the other one to earth. That's what ECUs do. ECUs never send out power. ECUs just go to earth. So, for example, the fuel pump relay, the fuel pump controlled by the ECU, the little purple wire as it is on the Saab ECU, all that does, when it turns the fuel pump on, it just goes to earth. And then, yeah, you run a permanent 12 volt into 85, and then it gets switched to earth to turn it on. And also what you can do then when you're wiring it is if you've got a permanent 12 volt coming into your 30, because you've got your permanent 12 volt coming into your 30, which is then going to eventually go to 87 once this is energized to power your pump, you can loop 30 and 85 together, so you've got your permanent 12 volts. So you don't even need a big fat wire coming in for your 12 volts for the pump power. and then you don't need an additional 12 volt. You can just piggyback off that. Just connect that, and then that switches to earth via the ECU. Does that make sense? Off the main loom, we've got a few sort of like sub looms coming off. So like this one here, I've got radiator fan on it. I've got intercooler pump, intercooler fan, and then running down here, I've got the wires for the speedo sensor. Then I have got reverse light and fuel pump. I'm going to start wrapping this loom up and making it look much prettier. I can already hear people in the comments saying, why are your wires all the same colour? Do you know, the electric doesn't care what colour the wires are, but my budget does. I've seen it before where people chase wiring faults through the colour of the wire, and a wire can change colour as it comes from the ECU to by the time it gets halfway across the vehicle. Yeah, it's great. It's a little bit more helpful. It speeds the process up of identifying things slightly quicker, but nowhere near as quick as continuity checking, and nowhere near as like factual as continuity checking with a multimeter. What wire is what. So color wise, I am not bothered enough to make the loom in all individual colors. What is important though is the thickness of the wire, and the thickness of the wire then means the amp capacity of it. So on this I've used 18, 16, 14, 12 and 9 American wire gauge, and that depends, basically totally depends on what service is running, and what you're doing when you've got to work out the amp capacity of the service that you're trying to run. So the washer motor, for example, I wouldn't be putting an 18 wire gauge on that and then a 30 amp fuse. You always want to make sure your wire is more capable of running the motor than it needs to be, and then the fuse is rated less than the cable, because if you want anything to give out, melt, burn, catch fire, it's the fuse, not the wire. The fuse won't catch fire. The fuse will just pop and everything's fine. But the wire, if it's too thin and you've got too high a fuse on it, you're gonna have a fire. Right. Anyway, let's just start wrapping this loom. Okay, so I've made a start from the ECU. These battery powers that are going to go to that buzz bar, and yeah, as far as I've got so far. Then the whole loom's going to tuck up into these. I'm going to probably line these in some sort of rubber. They're very sharp. Okay, it's the next day. Let me show you where I have gotten up to. The loom is wrapped all the way up to under the dash. The fuse box mounted where I'm going to mount that. The battery buzz bar, what's going to run to that is run to that. I need to run a wire or two from here to the buzz bar. For this wire, which is the power to the buzz bar under the dash, that I'm going to run through a circuit breaker, a resettable circuit breaker. So that's not wired up yet. But the reason I wanted to do that is that these wires are all fused from here. So there's only short amounts of unfused wire, but this wire runs all the way to the dash with no fuses on it. It's only fused under the dash. So there's a big length of wire which could short circuit in multiple places and cause an issue. So yeah, I want to run a circuit breaker for that. And then what else do we have? I've run the loom up to here, wrapped that loom. That is, like I said, there's OBD in that, and then laptop connection at the top, 12 volt and USB. Something I didn't mention earlier is that the reason these are mounted here and not under the dash or not down here somewhere is that the engine cover makes a lovely desk. So I think if I'm ever like sat naving somewhere, my phone's going to be sat on top of that, and when I'm doing stuff with the laptop, it's going to be sat there. So rather than run wires from here all the way up there to fit things there, I just thought, yeah, let's run it there. It makes sense to me. So that's what the deal with that is. yeah, so hole sawed these 2 bits of metal and then glued a grommet on it so the loom doesn't get chewed up. And then this is where this loom runs. Just run some rubber hose over that because these are pretty aggressive. And the loom's all tucked there. This is the loom that goes into the nose of the vehicle. This is going to run the intercooler fans and pumps and radiator fan, so they all need wired up further under there. Then this comes the loom through another grommet down there, and then up under the dash. So originally this wiring went round here, right, on a ridiculously tight bend and was actually chafing through, and then it ran underneath here and then through a grommet, which I don't think you can see, somewhere in the corner. And I was thinking, that's a bit crap. I'm not going to do it that way. I didn't really know what to do about this bend, so I was like, let's just straight line it through this grommet, which already exists for some military equipment which isn't wired in anymore, and I've run it above here. I might put a piece of metal over the top to protect it from the handbrake, but I think it's going to be okay where it is. Terrible footage, but there is a little wren's nest in the corner of the door just inside the barn, and yeah, they keep flying back and forth. Lovely. Did I tell you I like birds? I like birds a lot. Anyway, back to the UAS stuff for just a moment, or not even, because basically I'm calling it here on this video. The next jobs for me is to start doing the underdash wiring, and that's going to be cutting to length, putting terminals on the end to suit instruments and switches, and wrapping it all up in loom tape. So yeah, I'll be doing that over the next few days, weeks, months, years. Yeah, I'm going to be getting on with that. And another thing is that I'm currently working in darkness other than these lights because I've only got 2 sockets on a 13 amp plug. It's basically on a big long extension lead from the house, which is quite annoying, right? Because when we looked at this place, I was like, wow, it's got an armoured cable going into the barn and power. It should be good. But it turns out it's just on a 13 amp plug. On the side of the apps. So I've just had to buy that, which is 75 kilos of 16mm armoured cable. It wasn't cheap. And I've got an electrician coming out to put a circuit breaker in this and run it all properly from the house, which will allow me to start playing with my new toy, not the picnic bench, the plasma table in the corner. What if I had that now a month and I've not even turned it on because I've got a little piddly extension lead and well, it won't last. It needs proper power. So yeah, that's it from me. The electrician's turning up next week, so hopefully shortly after that this place will all be up and running and I'll have lights and other luxuries, and yeah, hopefully I get my 2-post lift and my lathe and mill, etc. here soon. You'll see. Logistics nightmare. But yeah, thanks for watching and catch me in the next one. Bye.